We talked a little bit about Immanuel Kant and the idea of the categorical imperative. Categorical imperative being that reasoning or rationalizing process that people can go through no matter where they are in the world, whatever time they are in the world, to decide whether something is right or wrong. It's fairly simple. He says all people have access to this rationalizing process, which is, if everybody in the world did this, would that be okay? If it's not, then it's not okay for me to do it either. Right? That would be how he arrives at this categorical imperative. One of the interesting other discussions he came up with is the idea of using people as an end in themselves. That's probably an oxymoron of a sentence, to talk about using people as an end. Better way to say it is to say that he said that we need to treat people as ends in themselves and not as a means. So what's the difference between means and ends? Means would be doing whatever you have to do in order to achieve a specific end or result. So the end would be the result, or the consequence, or the end goal, the final purpose that you're trying to achieve with certain actions, right? When we talk about consequentialism, we talk about the ends justifying the means, right? A Holocaust, killing 6 million Jews and millions of other people as well, including gypsies and blacks and all kinds of other people, in order to achieve the end of having an Aryan state, an all-white Germany. That was kind of the thinking of Adolf Hitler and the guys that worked with him, right? The ends justified the means. Now, that's an extreme example, but that's to show that the slippery slope in that particular case is not so outrageous. It's happened at least once on a major anti-humanity scale in the world's history. And so it's something that we have to pay attention to. By contrast, Immanuel Kant, remember, he was religious. He was a Lutheran, right? He came from a certain area of Prussia, area that is probably now Germany. I can't remember exactly which city he was closest to. It's been a long time. In any case, he was Lutheran, and his father was Lutheran, and he lived a very strict existence himself, according to Christian principles, and he thought very, very hard about these types of things. So as he was coming up with the idea of the categorical imperative, he was living a very strict life himself, one that was so strict that people in the town could set their watches by the time that he walked by, because he lived such an orderly and disciplined life that he did the same thing at the same time every day. And people could actually set their watches according to his behaviors. But among other things, he was doing a very strict analysis of what it meant to be doing the right thing, what is good. And in addition to coming up with the idea of the categorical imperative, he came up with another caveat. Figure out what the categorical imperative is and figure out whether it lifts people up, right? The end of that categorical imperative, rationality, that behavior that we could justify after going through the thought process of the categorical imperative. Does it lift people up, or does it simply use people in order to achieve another result that we could justify? It might be good, but it's not as good as lifting people up themselves. He said, do everything as if we're treating people as the purpose for our actions. Lifting people up, they are the ends, they are the purpose for our action. People are more important. So it would be good to have a business to make money, so that we can use people in order to make money. But the end is not the people themselves. If we do business, however, in order to lift people up and happen to get rich in the process, well, then that business is a byproduct, that profit is a byproduct of what is the truly good relationship in that action. A lawyer becomes a lawyer. Represents people that can't afford to pay that lawyer. Represents the people anyway. Handling it, knowing that he or she may not get paid for that representation. It's treating people as an end in themselves. Using those lawyerly skills for the right purpose. Now, if that lawyer does happen to get paid, that's a good thing, right? Getting paid is good. Pro bono work, however, we recognize that as a good thing in society for a reason, because we recognize it as treating people as an end in themselves. It's a supererogatory, which we discussed in the last video, right? It's not a duty. It's going above and beyond that duty and figuring out that supererogatory, or that super duty, for lack of a easier way of making it a memorable term, is in fact the duty. So we have a life on a higher plane. We live according to supererogatories or super duties, as opposed to simply our duties. We're not doing just enough to get by. We're not walking that line between good and evil. We're walking so far away from that line that even if we err, we're still on the side of good. Treating people as an end in themselves falls well within that category. So, Kant focused on duty, but he also focused on supererogatories. He also focused on treating people as an end in themselves. That would be a universal moral law, right? That goes above and beyond the categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant, when he was talking about supererogatories, he called them something else. He called them imperfect duties. And so, imperfect doesn't have any derogatory definition as it's used in this phrase, imperfect duties. It has to do with supererogatories. It means that while you're not obligated to act in that fashion, it's still the right thing to do. A better thing, in many cases, to do. Notice that supererogatories and treating people as ends in themselves has a whole lot more space for gracious actions, acts of grace, kindness, mercy, charity. Love is foundation, and relationship with God is the ultimate motivation. Relationship with God, seeing that God doesn't ask us, doesn't demand that we live by minimal standards. Those are certainly natural and perceivable and rational and reasonable to come up with. We can conceive of what those categorical imperatives are. God calls us to act at a higher level. And if we want to be our moral selves, our fully human selves, then we would live on that level as well. So, good works as a response to grace, super good works as a response to grace. The grace that we've received and the grace that we in turn give to the people around us. That's why people do the right thing. Now, sometimes people do the right thing. They'll become Doctors Without Borders or World Vision or something like that, appearing to do the right thing towards the rest of the world. And that's noble. It's a good thing. I'm not going to try to stop any of that kind of behavior. But it's not necessarily recognizing people as ends in themselves. It's more of a pity-driven action. The motivation is not pure, not good, not fully good, not the best that it could possibly be. Extreme acts of self-sacrifice, martyrdom, risking our lives to save other people, those would be things that would be treating other people as ends in themselves. Sacrificing ourselves on their behalf to lift them up. Radical acts of generosity, being extreme poverty, voluntarily poor ourselves, Mother Teresa type stuff. Setting ourselves up to get the diseases and the poverty that strikes people down and causes pain and suffering and death. Those things might fit within this category of saying that sacrificing ourselves for the good of other people is a better way for us to exist. And in fact, that's what will give us true fulfillment, not whether we are able to fill our wallet so that it is never empty and gives us the freedom to do whatever it is that we want to do, but whether we do the right thing in spite of our inclinations to do otherwise. Is that it? I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say about that right now. Remember, we're not doing this for any kind of reciprocity. We're not looking for someone to pay us back or give us any kind of recognition. We're not doing this only to the people that we love and care about, our family or our friends. We're doing it to the people that do not deserve, as if we deserve anything, right? We're not setting ourselves up to be the final judge as to whether anybody else deserves any kind of kindness or supererogatory actions by us. It's interesting to say that living on the level of the supererogatory makes absolutely no sense from a scientific perspective. If we look at it as inclinations that we get as a result of being evolved individuals, I would say no, the psychopath is more a result of evolution than is the person who is living on that higher plane of existence. Survival of the fittest has nothing to do with self-sacrifice. Survival of the fittest means we don't sacrifice ourselves. If we're better, we keep ourselves safe. We let other people die. We run faster than the other pair, so the other person that's with us, so that the bear will eat them instead of us, right? It's counterintuitive to live by supererogatories. And yet, we're called to do so. And it's our job, it is our duties, if we're going to live life on a higher plane, to be prepared to live not just by walking that line between good and evil, but by walking so far above it that doing evil is not even a possibility for us. Do I do that personally? Absolutely not. Remember, I'm a failure, and I have sinned. I have done bad things, and I'll do bad things again in the future. It doesn't mean that I want to change the rules to make those bad things no longer bad. They're still bad. I just admit that I have crossed that line many times myself. I think that's all I want to say. That's enough for that for now. We'll start talking now a little bit about civilizations and the clash of civilizations. There's a reason for that, particularly as we get through this time where identity groups seem to be dominating our thinking, right? If somebody is part of an identity group that has been oppressed in somebody's thinking through history or by the system, then identity groups joining up with other identity groups in some kind of an alliance will somehow give them some power to fight against history and the system and the powers that be, like old white men like me. We'll help to demonize those guys. Or Christians. Christians are demonized by, well, Muslims and the woke all the time. But we'll talk about that in our next video. It's good to see you. See you again soon.